Good evening to all. I am Dr. Shivanshu Rajgoyal from the northern part of India, and I'm here to talk about the COVID-19 protection and treatment protocols, what we follow at India. I'm a consultant pulmonologist at the Artemis Hospital, Gurgaon. Protection, as we all know, is basically an act of giving safety to someone or something. But in terms of COVID-19, if I tell you, it is still our best bet. Following social distancing, wearing masks, staying away, taking hand sanitization is still the best bet forward. In terms of treatment, the medical care to cure a patient for an illness or injury. But when we talk about COVID-19, we are still learning every day with our own experience of our colleagues, and the trials being done. This is a virus with an incubation period of 5.1 days, where the infectivity starts right 2 days before the onset of symptoms and lasts up to 8 days. But the extent and the role played by the preclinical or asymptomatic infections in transmission is still under investigation. The three broad categories of cases. The confirmed cases are the clear cases where they have got, uh, irrespective of their symptom or no, they are confirmed by the RT-PCR, so they are called a confirmed case of COVID-19. Probable cases are the ones where the suspicion is high, but either the test has not been performed or the test has come out to be inconclusive. Suspect cases are the ones where they have got recent onset of respiratory illness after coming in contact with a confirmed case of COVID-19 in the last 14 days, or having visited an area where there is community transmission of COVID-19 in the last 14 days. Also are the category of patients who have got severe acute respiratory illness and you do not have any other diagnosis to explain this particular illness. They are also commonly a suspect category. When we talk about symptoms of COVID-19, the most common being fever. About 27 to 30% of the population will come up with fever, followed by cough, sore throat, difficulty of breathing, chills, myalgia, muscle ache, or the recently known new onset of loss of sense of some smell and taste. But when we talk about old population or the people who are immunocompromised, the symptoms might be very atypical. They might not present with the classical symptoms of COVID-19. They might just present with a new onset of loss of alertness, diarrhea, and absence of fever is found to be not very uncommon in old population. Protection practices have to be explained right from the community level till the aerosol generating procedures at different levels. Community based protection is well known: wearing masks, covering your nose and mouth, washing your hands frequently for 20 seconds, keeping a safe distance from somebody, using a disinfectant of 60% alcohol wherever possible, and as frequently as possible. If you are personally symptomatic with upper respiratory symptoms with running nose or sneezing or fever, you should avoid stepping out of the house to prevent the transmission to others. At the level of triage, when the patient enters the hospital, they should be all given a triple layer surgical mask. If possible, they should be directed to a separate area or an isolation room. A 1 meter distance should be maintained between two patients. Hand hygiene and covering the face and mouth during coughing and sneezing should be again and again stressed upon. Droplet precautions have to be followed whenever you examine a patient within 1 to 2 meters. You always have to be wearing a triple layer surgical mask. And if you think the respiratory secretions are a lot, then wearing covering your face with a face shield or a goggle is going to be helpful. Keeping patients in a single room or grouping together of the etiological diagnosis together can be followed in terms of logistics. And whenever a patient is supposed to be transferred from the emergency department to the COVID designated area, a specialized corridor has to be created where nobody else is allowed when the patient is being transferred, and a separate designated lift for these patients to be transferred. And the moment a transfer is complete, the entire area needs to be sanitized. Usage of PPE, which includes a triple layer surgical mask, eye protection, head cover, shoe cover, and a complete long sleeve gown is important. The donning and doffing is the most important step while using a PPE. Somebody needs to be looking at you once you are doing this, because any breach at this step can be hazardous in long term. So when we talk about aerosol generating procedures such as intubation, suctioning, bronchoscopy, CPR, a full PPE has to be worn, and full PPE should not be confused by just wearing a mask. A mask is not going to give you adequate protection. Your full PPE is important, and if it is possible, perform the aerosol procedures in a negative pressure room with minimum of 12 air changes per hour. Being a pulmonologist, I cannot move ahead without talking about bronchoscopy. We have got three types of mask called the triple layer mask, the N, P, and R category of mask called the 95, 99, and 100 category, and the elastomertic respirators. A three-ply mask or a simple surgical mask is ineffective and not recommended for the bronchoscopist. And N95 mask and elastomertic respirators are equally effective, but elastomertic respirators are considered more user-friendly. Again, a full PPE supposed to be worn. Only wearing a mask and performing a bronchoscopy is not the right way forward. Aerosol box is an innovative design for people who are doing bronchoscopy. A patient lies inside the box with his head and neck inside the aerosol box, and the bronchoscopist performs with his hands inside and the bronchoscope inserted through an opening in the box. This drastically reduces the amount of secretions and the spillover over the bronchoscopist face. So, if you're doing a bronchoscopy for a patient who is a known case or a suspect case of COVID-19, do use a aerosol box. Moving ahead from the protection strategies, now we're talking about the management protocol. The management varies right from the type of case or the presentation and where which side the patient needs to be cared about. The first and the most common case category is the mild case. These are the cases who have got just mild symptoms in terms of fever or upper respiratory symptoms. They are not very sick in terms of low oxygen or pneumonia. These are the people, they can be managed for home isolation or a COVID care center if there is no caregiver at home. A contact and droplet precautions have to be stressed upon. Hand hygiene, symptomatic management in terms of fever, in terms of diarrhea or upper respiratory symptoms have to be explained to the patient. Hydroxychloroquine has been given approval for use for mild cases if they are in the high risk category. The high risk category mean above 60 years of age or with comorbidities such as diabetes, hypertension, long term lung disease, heart disease, or kidney diseases, patients of cerebrovascular problems, or BMI above 25. A baseline ECG is important for patients who are on hydroxychloroquine, and a QTC interval below 500 or preferably below 480 is something which is safe for somebody to take hydroxychloroquine. Anybody who in the mild category, if develops a new symptoms of increased shortness of breath or persistent pain or pressure in the chest or new onset of confusion with blue lips, have to be moved to the hospital or a proper COVID care hospital. Now, a slide about favipiravir. Favipiravir has been recently given a regulatory approval for mild to moderate cases by a study which showed a comparison of favipiravir with lopinavir and ritonavir, and they showed there was the disease progression and viral clearance was much better in the favipiravir arm. And this works by selective inhibition of the viral RNA dependent RNA polymerase. The problem with favipiravir right now is the side effects in terms of nausea and increased transaminitis. Also, the pill burden of favipiravir is very high for the patient. Doxycycline and ivermectin, the recently article was published by the combination of Chinese group and the Bangladesh group, where they compared combination of ivermectin and doxycycline with azithromycin and hydroxychloroquine, and they found the treatment outcome, adverse effect, and the safety was much superior in the ivermectin and doxycycline. So, moderate cases. In moderate cases, they are symptomatic in terms of proper pneumonia, and they have a but they do not have signs of a severe disease. The respiratory rate is around 24 or more per minute, saturation being less than 94 but above 90. These are the people, they cannot be managed at home and they should be managed in a proper dedicated COVID healthcare center. Now, the saturation has to be monitored. They have to be given supplementation of oxygen with preferably a non-rebreather mask or a high-flow nasal cannula. And awake proning needs to be stressed upon. I will talk about the awake proning in my subsequent slide. 12 lead ECG is a must, and if possible, done daily. Inflammatory markers with CRP, D-dimer, ferritin to be done on every second day. Hydroxychloroquine has been given approval for the use of moderate cases, and methylprednisolone was given approval for given to be given for 3 days in at the dose of zero point 0.5 to 1 milligram per kg. But recently, after the recovery trial results have been shown, the dexamethasone at zero point 0.1 to zero point 0.2 milligram per kg has also been shown to show good benefits. So, along with all the above, prophylactic dose of low molecular weight heparin such as enoxaparin at 40 milligrams subcutaneous per day is recommended for these patients. Any worsening in symptoms, these patients need to be shifted to the next category of care. A very recent paper showing the correlation of inflammatory markers and severity, where they compared all the combination of inflammatory markers such as CRP, ferritin, D-dimer, cardiac troponin, IL-6, LDH, procalcitonin with absolute lymphocyte count, and they found a high CRP or a progressively increasing CRP with high ferritin and a low absolute lymphocyte count shows the signs of severity. The Gattinoni group from Italy had divided COVID pathophysiology into two types broadly, the L and the H type. The L types are the ones with subtle ground glass opacities being peripherally placed and bilaterally, but H types are the one which classical ARDS pattern, heavy, boggy lungs, more amount of consolidation in the bases. So the L types are the ones who are in the society not very symptomatic, but they tend to be hypoxic. Once you examine them, you find them they're hypoxic. So the pathophysiology being the pulmonary vasoplegia rather than a full-blown pneumonia in the L type. uh, HRCT scans categories have been made where there is right the categories from CORAD's classification of 1 where there is no suspicion of COVID to CORAD's 5 or 6 where the cases are typical of COVID. This is easily available online where we do the CORAD's classification of CT scan. CT scan has shown its own role in diagnosing COVID, and some studies have even shown the findings on a CT scan might predate the symptoms by 4 days. So it can be used in conjunction along with your clinical suspicion, might not be beneficial as a single test. Awake proning, as I had mentioned, is to be given for any patient who has got respiratory embarrassment severe enough to be admitted in the hospital, where a patient is advised to lie prone for at least 30 minutes to 120 minutes and subsequently in a left lateral position, then right lateral position, then upright. All these positional changes have been known to improve the VQ mismatch in a COVID-19 patient. High flow nasal cannula, I would not go into the details, but it's a device where a very high flow system is used for generating oxygenation in a patient along with some amount of positive airway pressure. In a calculation of every 10 liter of high flow nasal flow creates 1 centimeter of positive airway pressure. But the concerns about aerosol in a high flow nasal cannula have to be addressed. So patient can wear a mask over a high flow nasal cannula would solve the concern about the aerosol generation. Remdesivir, a lot has been spoken about it, and a lot of studies have been published about Remdesivir use. In India, it has been given emergency use authorization where it can be considered in patients with moderate disease and those patients who are on oxygen. But the concerns being anybody with a liver function rise more than 5 times the normal or with severe renal impairment or the patients who are pregnant and lactating females. The dose being 200 milligram IV on the day 1 followed by 100 milligram per day for the next 5 days. Convalescent plasma therapy, again an off-label use as of now in India, has been allowed for patients with moderate disease who are not improving on oxygen or have been progressively worsening despite the use of steroids. So, sorry, the plasma can be brought from the patients who have recovered from the COVID illness, and the plasma IgG titer have been studied. So 200 ml of convalescent plasma can be transfused or should in not less than 2 hours, and if required may be repeated after 12 to 24 hours. Severe cases are the ones who require mechanical ventilation or who are not improving on anything in terms of oronasal mask, NIV, helmet mask, or HFNC. These are the people whose respiratory rate is above 30, saturation is below 90%. These are the people who require methylprednisolone IV at 1 to 2 milligram per kg, or recently by the recovery trial, they can be given dexamethasone. But once intubated, the standard ARDS net protocol needs to be followed, and the entire protocol of managing sepsis, septic shock, managing of complications, all have to be followed like any other critical patient in an ICU. Tocilizumab is a drug which I would like to mention for an off-label use considered in patients with moderate disease who have got progressively increasing oxygen requirement, but can also be given in patients who are mechanically ventilated and who are not improving on steroids. The long-term safety data is still unknown. The presence of raised inflammatory markers such as CRP, ferritin, and IL-6 is considered important for its use, but patient needs to be consented or the relatives needs to be consented regarding the development of secondary infections or neutropenia post use of tocilizumab. The dosage being 8 milligram per kg on the first day as a stat dose, maximum being 800 milligram on the first time, can be repeated at 12 to 24 hours. Small mention about the recovery trial, recent trial where they showed the reduced mortality or the reduced death rates of, in the terms of one third in ventilated patients and one fifth in patients on oxygen. Patients who were receiving 6 milligram IV methylprednisolone per day for 10 days in comparison to the patients who were on standard care. I would like to end my presentation by mentioning a small line, the 2020 being in a year where the most negative word was to be called positive, but it's for us to make this turn around and to turn its meaning around. Thank you so much. I'm Dr. Shivanshu, and I leave you all with my mail, shivanshu.goel@artemishospitals.com. Anything, do write to me, and I'll be very happy to answer back. Thank you so much, and be safe.